My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, has COP26 become an orgy of hypocrisy? I'll give my verdict in the digest shortly. Then insulate Britain's spokesman Liam Norton and net zero skeptic Tory MP Philip Davies go head-to-head in the clash. Is Matt Hancock right that NHS workers be forced to get the COVID jab before the winter or face the sack? My superstar panel, Carol Malone, Benjamin Butterworth and Esther Kraku, will debate that. The positive Professor Carol Sikora investigates why the mainstream media have incorrectly reported on COVID hospitalisations today and seem desperate to avoid talking about the dramatic dip in cases. In The Outsider, Darren Grimes on whether Tory sleaze claims will hurt Boris Johnson with ordinary Brits. Toby Young is uncancelled, revealing why lockdown skeptics like him have lost the argument, even though he's hopeful his old pal Bojo will refrain from plunging the country into Plan B. And businesswoman Bernie Spotforth gives her first interview on why she was banned by Twitter for simply stating the facts until COVID passport opponents fought back by demanding the big tech giant reinstate Bernie. Plus, a first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages and the media buzz, and I'll crown tonight's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. This is Dan Wootton Tonight. Let's go. Just one thing before we get started. I've missed you these past couple of weeks, but we've been working on making this show even better. So it's now 2 hours of the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns always. All your favourite regulars and superstar panellists will be back tonight. It's Carol Malone, Benjamin Butterworth and Esther Kraku, but we're going to do it all before 11 p.m, where you can stay tuned for Headliners, a newspaper review with a difference. I just want to thank you, though, for your unwavering loyalty, your passionate support, and for continuing to spread the news and the word about GB News. I will never forget it. The digest is coming up in just a moment. Why Flop 26 has become an orgy of hypocrisy. But first, tonight's news with Polly Middlehurst.
Good evening. Your latest GB News headlines this hour. MPs have held an emergency debate on the government's vote to block the suspension of Owen Paterson and to overhaul parliamentary standards. The Commons Speaker, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, says any changes to misconduct proceedings must be done with cross-party support. The Prime Minister, who today was visiting a hospital in Northumberland, says he takes accusations of government corruption seriously. But the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, accuses Boris Johnson of corroding the trust between voters and politicians.
Last week, the Prime Minister damaged himself. And despite the bravery of some members opposite, he damaged his party. But most importantly, he damaged our democracy.
The new chair and director of Yorkshire County Cricket Club has apologised to former player Azim Rafiq over his allegations of institutional racism. The club has also reached a financial settlement with Azim over his employment tribunal against the club. Lord Patel has vowed to oversee urgent and seismic change to make the club inclusive for all future players.
Racism or any form of discrimination is not banter. It's simply not acceptable. We're sorry for what you and your family experienced and the way in which we've handled this. What happened to you must never happen again.
An injured man who was trapped in a cave in South Wales for more than 2 days has finally been rescued. Almost 250 people joined the rescue efforts. The 74-year-old was unable to move after falling in one of the UK's largest cave systems at the Brecon Beacons. He's now been taken to hospital for treatment of non-life-threatening injuries, including a broken jaw and leg and spinal injuries. What a day. UK travellers can today fly to the United States for the first time in nearly 2 years. The US has opened its borders to fully vaccinated visitors, but they must take a COVID test within 3 days of arrival. Children needing to take a test 3 to 5 days later. British Airways and Virgin Atlantic synchronised their departure from London's Heathrow Airport this morning to the United States to mark the occasion. Now, a dress worn by Amy Winehouse has sold for more than £180,000 at auction. That's 16 times the original estimate. The halter-neck mini dress was worn by the singer during her final stage performance, just a month before her death at the age of 27. More than £3 million was raised from the sale of over 800 items, including clothing, handwritten notes and Amy's accessories. You're right up to date. I'm back in an hour.
Have you ever lived through a time when our so-called leaders have been more out of touch with everyday Brits than the past 7 days of unbridled hypocrisy at the the COP26 charade in Glasgow? Having watched the spectacle with growing rage from afar, I'd go as far to say the political class and media elite have never been this disconnected with the honest, hard-working folk they're meant to represent. Of course we want to protect our planet. I've been a proud environmentalist, as you know, since I was a child. But to be told that we must fundamentally change our way of life by a bunch of preening multi-millionaires who flew in to visit us on carbon-spewing private jets is a bad joke gone too far. Think of what the privileged have expected us to turn a blind eye to this past week. There's doddery Joe Biden, so bored with the apparent bid to stop the world ending that he fell asleep.
This conference is one of the most important meetings in history. You have the chance to make decisions and reach agreements which will affect the lives of generations to come.
There's the BBC actively campaigning for the end of all coal mining in the UK, throwing impartiality out the window.
Going to the developing world saying phase out coal at the same time as not ruling out a new coal mine in Britain. We started the Industrial Revolution. We should have closed
I've just
the
given
mines.
you the statistics before you have
but why don't you just say we're not going to open them?
I've just given you statistics.
Why don't we be clear on the coal mine? The
moved
Chinese
from
will say we can't
80%.
take this guy seriously.
What absolutely everybody finds incontrovertible is the progress the UK has already made.
No, I'm sorry to bang on about the coal, but the point is, you kind of, it makes you look. No, makes you look a little bit weaselly, not answering the coal question, because they're going to go and you're talking about coal.
I've answered the coal question.
There's the Insulate Britain terrorists continuing to stop us going to work, school and hospital, even though they haven't bothered to insulate their own homes. There's Prince Charles wading into politics again by encouraging the world to start a vast military-style campaign against climate change.
Countries, many of whom are burdened by growing levels of debt, simply cannot afford to go green. Here we need a vast military-style campaign to marshal the strength of the global private sector. With trillions at its disposal, far beyond global GDP, and with the greatest respect, beyond even the governments of the world's leaders, it offers the only real prospect of achieving fundamental economic transition.
And then there's the hypocrite-in-chief, the big boss of COP26 sponsor Sky, Dana Strong. Now, she's going to start using her company's TV shows, do you know this, to try and nudge Brits towards eating less meat and changing the way we travel. But this woman, there she is, she actually spent the first half of the year commuting to London from Philadelphia in the US via, wait for it, you guessed it, private jet. Even Boris flew back to Westminster from Scotland on one. Yet his government wants you and me to spend tens of thousands of pounds we do not have to replace our gas boiler with hopeless heat pumps and to replace our petrol and diesel vehicles with expensive electric cars. And that's just the start. After the brilliant Brexit vote that granted the great British public freedom from the EU, I thought the era of game-changing referendums should be over. But I have changed my mind. There must be a referendum on net zero, so Brits are given the chance to democratically endorse the biggest change to how we live in a generation. There's no real political debate going on about such a seismic change, one that will massively increase our cost of living. No wonder red wall voters have said in a new survey that they fear being taxed ridiculously and bled dry, with the worst effects hitting the people in the middle, like them, while the very richest and poorest have protection. A petition for a referendum on whether to keep the 2050 net zero target now has over 16,000 signatures, meaning the government must respond. If it gets to 100,000 signatures, which it almost certainly will, then it will be considered for a debate in Parliament. I know why there is such outrage, by the way, because the UK has already more than played our part. We have reduced our carbon emissions faster than any other major democracy, over half in just 30 years, and we now contribute less than 1% of the world's emissions. China is at 27% and fast growing. As the brave Tory MP for Shipley, Philip Davies, wrote in a letter to a constituent that has gone viral about his government's plan for net zero, such action would be utterly futile, virtue-signalling gesture politics, which would almost bankrupt the country along with many families. The estimated cost of getting from less than 1% of global carbon emissions to net zero is estimated to be £1 trillion in the UK. That is the money the country and many of my constituents can ill afford. Of course we want a clean planet. I mean, of course we do. I do, and I know you do. But there's absolutely no reason that hard-working Brits should pay for it while China and India do what the hell they want. But to respond now, my superstar panel is here. The columnist and broadcaster Carol Malone, senior reporter at the newspaper Benjamin Butterworth, and social commentator Esther Krakow. Carol Malone, do you agree that there needs to be a referendum on net zero?
Oh, God, yeah. You know, what we just saw at COP26, I think Douglas Murray described last week as a big green gab fest. You know, he said it was a grandstanding vanity project. And all the instances you've just described, you know, there is evidence, Dan, that the way politicians behave on climate change, what they do, affects the way the rest of us behave. So if we all behaved like they're doing, and it really hacked me off that Boris came back in a private plane from that. He only had
unbelievable
2 days there. He came back, and do you know what he came back for? He came back for a dinner at the Garrick. And no doubt when he got off the plane at the other end, there'd have been 2 Range Rovers waiting for him, which would have been polluting. And a spokesman tried to justify this, saying the Prime Minister has to be able to get about. Well, so do we, but we're being told what we have to get about in, the kind of cars we've got to get about in, and we've got to pay thousands and thousands of pounds for cars we can't afford, electric cars. So, yeah, I mean, the hypocrisy is staggering. Biden's promises, you know, at COP26 is costing the American people, that will cost the American people $11,000 a year, every year, you know, ad infinitum. So we can't afford it.
And Benjamin, the point is, we could get down to zero carbon emissions tomorrow. It's not going to change the overall situation until someone reigns in China and reigns in India.
I mean, look, you know, this idea that COP hasn't been successful, that it was, what, an orgy of hypocrisy, I think you referred to it as.
Yes, absolutely.
Is completely unfair and not founded in what they're achieving.
What they're achieving?
90,
polluted more than Scotland would
Esther, I'm speaking. 90% of the world's economies have agreed net zero targets within this century, within halfway through this century.
They can agree as much as they like.
And so hang on, you can't say that it's not achieving anything when 90% of the world's economies have achieved that.
Are you happy for all of these billionaires to go to this summit on private jets and then tell us that we have to get rid of our petrol and diesel cars? Are you happy with that?
No, and that is hypocrisy for which they should do better. But to suggest that that is undermining huge achievements from so many of the world's leaders is not fair.
Do you know,
hang on, Carol, what about two-thirds of the world's leaders agreeing to end deforestation?
The Paris COP in 2015 has the promises they made there haven't been fulfilled. Read the deforestation. Indonesia left the conference and immediately rode back on the promises it made, as a lot of them will here as well. And you're right, you know, there's no bits. Another commentator said this week, having a climate conference without the world's biggest polluters, is like having a trial without a defendant. It's true. China wasn't there. And China have said they won't even start cutting back till 2030. They won't be carbon zero until 2060. And India 2070.
2070.
2070.
I mean, Esther, I want to bring Esther in here. I want to bring Esther in here because, Esther, I have just been furious. You know, I'm an environmentalist. I absolutely believe we need to... Oh, how dare you, Benjamin? I'll come back to you because I am an environmentalist. I just don't believe that it's ordinary, hardworking British people who have to change our lives anymore. It's not us. We're not the issue.
The people that claim to care about this the most are the ones that are flouting the rules the most. How can you possibly pollute more than Scotland would in a year just getting to a conference about how we should stop polluting? Where is the sense in that?
You didn't hear me justify that.
No, but you
didn't hear me justify that. So why don't you argue with the substance of what they're achieving and not the distractions of the individuals?
Should there be a referendum, Benjamin, on net zero? Why not?
Net zero was in the manifestos of all the major parties. So why should there be a referendum?
Well, net zero as a concept may not have been, but certainly what wasn't in the referendum was the fact that we were going to have to get rid of our gas boilers and pay tens of thousands of pounds for heat pumps, which make lots of noise and don't work particularly effectively, for example.
And are going to take all of our power supplies, and the prices are going to be colossal. And we won't even be ready for it by 2050. We're not going to be ready.
How can the government enact such huge changes in the lives of the public, and you genuinely think we shouldn't be able to vote on it? Where is the sense in that?
You do vote on it at each general election.
No, we should
and
have
people did vote. People did
because there are different ways of tackling climate change.
No, because that's not the kind of democracy we live in regardless.
Choice here.
And
do
also,
you not understand that? People
there is no choice because the choice is being underwater or not. The choice being underwater or not. It's not my opinion, it's a scientific fact. It's a scientific fact. And also earlier, Carol said that nothing...
Scaremongering scientists, Benjamin, have been telling us since the 1970s that we're going to be underwater. We were told that we were going to be underwater by the year 2000. And I just want to come back to a disgusting... I just want to come back to a disgusting point that you made earlier when I was trying to speak to Esther, questioning my credentials as an environmentalist. Actually, Benjamin, I'm from New Zealand. I was born in New Zealand. We were told when I was growing up in my youth that we were facing near certain destruction because of the ozone hole, which was growing by the day. And I was like a little young Thunberg, you know. I had the fear of God put into me as a little 9-year-old by these very irresponsible scientists that the world was going to end. What I've learned over the last couple of decades is that these scientists are very often wrong, that technology is the way to deal with these things, and that companies can make changes, and it isn't ordinary folk who should have to pay for it. So tell me,
if things aren't changing, why were the last 7 years the hottest on record? Come on.
On record from when?
Since they started recording.
Since records began. Well, that's interesting because I've not heard that fact. But when they say
7
things
years in
like
a row,
we're having the worst floods we've ever had, you haven't lived long enough to know that that's actually simply not true. There were parts of this country that were not
neither of you might be a bit older.
I have.
You're not Jesus.
Very few people are denying that there is climate change. I'm certainly
not. But you're denying we have to do anything about it.
No one's saying that.
This is exactly what the left do. You make it such a binary choice.
So what would you do?
Between a net zero target in the UK,
dealing with the problem,
but it's not going to deal with the problem.
So what would you do? Because it's very easy. It's very easy to shout at the people trying to do things. What would you do?
What we're arguing about is what's being done in this country. As Dan said in his intro, we represent less than 1% of global emissions, and we can do whatever we like. We can carry our linen bags to the shop. We can chuck all our plastic bottles out. But as long as India and China are belching out the carbon emissions that they are, what we do doesn't matter.
But I tell you what, Benjamin, let me tell you. We have done enough. We are doing enough. But what net zero is going to do is transfer all of the costs to hard-working Brits who can ill afford it at a time in their lives when the cost of living crisis is getting worse by the day. And that's something that I'm going to continue fighting for.
You speak about hypocrisy. Hypocrisy would be Britain not doing its bit and as much as it can while lecturing China and India. We must lead the world.
You don't have the facts. We are leading the world. We are the fastest country out of major democracies, out of the G20 democracies, in terms of cutting our carbon emissions. So you should have a look at the facts. You should have a look at what Thatcher did in the 1980s.
And yet you would have rejected the Paris Accord in the first place, based on your attitude.
And also, Ben, a lot of the world leaders now, and they've come away from the conference, and all this 1.5 to get the temperature down. They're now already saying, and they've only just left this conference, they're saying, well, maybe 1.6 would be okay, 1.7 would be okay.
Well,
you know why?
Because
they don't want to inflict the economic pain on their people. And they can't bear the political pain because they'll get voted out. And that's what will happen.
This may not be something that you like to hear, Benjamin. We are the world leaders in cutting carbon emissions. We are environmental world leaders. And I absolutely will not have hard-working Brits face this pain. And I will continue to campaign for this on the show as the weeks and the months go on. Because believe me, there's absolutely no plurality when it comes to the political parties in Westminster at the moment. They all think the same thing on this.
Debate.
No, there's not.
Look at how angry you are.
And we will have it on this show.
What are you so scared of? If the world is going to go underwater,
let me be very clear.
Why are you terrified of us actually voting?
Let me be very clear. As all the polls show, most people agree with net zero by an overwhelming majority.
Until they find out how much it's going to cost.
£50 grand per household to get to net
until they find out
until half the world's population is turning on the doorstep because of climate change.
Benjamin are scared of, Esther, exactly what they were scared of before the Brexit referendum.
Exactly.
They are scared of ordinary Brits being able to use their voice and exercise their democratic right, and that's why people like Benjamin will do all they can to stop a net zero referendum. But my superstar panel are here all night. Carol Malone, Benjamin Butterworth and Esther Krakow, thank you so much. But still to come, why are the mainstream media happy to repeat fake news from NHS England Chief Executive Amanda Pritchard about COVID cases surging when they are in fact plummeting? Carol Sikora, the positive professor, is here to expose more COVID fake news. But up next in The Clash, was COP26 an orgy of hypocrisy? Insulate Britain's Liam Norton and Tory MP and net zero skeptic. He wrote that letter that's gone viral. Philip Davies, debate that one. Let us know what you think too. Dan@gbnews.uk is my email, or you can tweet us at GBNews. Back in a moment.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Time now for The Clash, as you've just heard in my digest. As far as I'm concerned, COP26 has been one long, pointless example of environmentalist theatre, with the political and media elite telling us how to change our lives while they continue to commute to work on private jets. But what do you think? Is COP26 an orgy of hypocrisy? You're now able to vote on that question on Twitter at GBNews. I'll bring you the results and some of your emails from dan@gbnews.uk in just a moment. But first, let's welcome tonight's Clash opponents, the infamous Liam Norton of Insulate Britain and net zero skeptic Philip Davies MP. It is great to have both of you here. Liam Norton, all of you environmentalists are proving yourselves over the course of this conference to be absolute hypocrites, aren't you? We've got folk like you campaigning for homes to be insulated when you don't insulate your own homes. And now you've got all of the world's leaders flying into this conference on private jets.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're right, Dan. COP26 is one of the biggest examples of criminality that's going on in the world right now. They're in the process of killing our kids. COP's killing our kids' futures. COP's at the moment is facilitating the destruction of young people all around the world.
Philip Davies, how do you respond?
Well, I think Liam's just highlighting what a set of fanatics these people are. I mean, whatever the world does, whatever they do on climate change, it will never, ever be enough. Even if we were to get down to the 1.5 degrees target, I'm sure Liam would say that's not enough. If we were to get down to 1 degree, that wouldn't be enough. It would never be enough for these fanatics. You know, it's worse than that, though. You know, this is going to almost bankrupt the country. It's going to cost my constituents and people up and down the country untold amounts of money on a completely futile gesture, because, look, the fact of the matter is, I'm sorry to disappoint anybody who's relying on the fact that all the world is going to come together to miraculously change the world's climate. It's not going to happen. It is just not going to happen. All of this money getting to net zero will be wasted because it won't make a blind bit of difference to global temperatures, because China, India, emerging economies in Africa are going to still churn out more and more carbon emissions because they want to get their people out of poverty, and why shouldn't they? And so what I would say to Liam is, if you really do worry about the impact of climate change on places around the world, rather than wasting time on a futile attempt to get to net zero, which won't make a blind bit of difference, let's spend some money on trying to help those countries that may be impacted on mitigate, on adapting to the changes in the world's climate. At least that money would be well spent. At least it would actually achieve something. Trying to get to net zero and spending trillions in the process will achieve absolutely nothing apart from inflict pain and misery on people up and down the country.
And Liam, don't you understand that? Do you not understand that ordinary Brits are very well aware that we've done more than any other major Western democracy, and that folk like you are actually trying to bankrupt the country?
Well, I'd like to ask Philip, does he understand that ordinary Brits, 3.2 million of them, are living in fuel poverty? Does he know that tens of thousands of elderly are freezing to death in their homes each year? You know, and please don't. No, hang on a minute, Dan. Hang on. Allow me to finish the sentence because this is important.
Facts on this show.
Yeah, facts. Go to the government website.
Thousands of elderly.
Go to the government website. It's the government's own figures, Dan. They're the government's own figures on fuel poverty. They were released earlier on. 3.2 million people are in fuel poverty, and tens of thousands of them are freezing to death in their homes. That's what's going on. And the plans that insulate Britain.
Thousands of people are not freezing to their deaths in
Look at the
homes in the
statistics,
UK.
Dan. They're on the government website, my friend. Look at the stats, OK? They're on the government website.
Liam,
and look, this country has been destroyed by the utter stupidity of the political class that haven't got a clue about what it is that they're talking about, and they haven't got the guts to stand up to private interests. This person is funded by the fuel lobbies and the Global Warming Policy Foundation and Tufton Street, all kinds of murky societies.
Are you making that claim
I've seen who you're. I've seen the freedom associations. All these murky
well, you've just made quite a serious claim.
All these kinds of murky societies.
So I'm going to give Philip Davies a chance to respond. Philip Davies, have you been bought off by the fuel lobby, as Liam suggests?
I've never been funded by the fuel lobby, by the Global Warming Foundation, by anyone in Tufton Street, by the Freedom Association. I've never been bought off or paid by any of those people. So that's just a blatant smear and lie. The point is, Liam, getting back to the actual facts of the matter rather than the sort of lies and smears, the fact of the matter is, if you're concerned about fuel poverty in the UK, we all are concerned about fuel poverty in the UK. I am. The cost of living is a massive issue in this country. It seems absolutely senseless to me to think that the solution to fuel poverty and the cost of living is to pursue policies that will just put up the price of people's energy and put up the price of people's fuel. If you're concerned about fuel poverty, then what you should be arguing for is that the government should be seeking to get the cheapest energy for constituents so that they can pay their fuel bills and live there. What you're seeking
you haven't investigated anything that we've been talking about.
You are seeking to put up the cost of energy.
No, we're talking about using less energy, Philip. Less energy. We need to bring energy use down to zero. That's what we're talking about. And look, have you got any idea of the science of what it is climate change means? Do you understand what the carbon lag is?
Liam,
do you understand what the Blue Ocean event is? Philip, Philip, do you understand what the Blue Ocean event is? Do you understand what the Blue Ocean event is?
Liam, I'm conducting this interview. This is what you like to do.
Liam, do you understand how much ice has been lost?
Questions, Liam.
Do you understand how much ice has been lost?
Liam, stop. I am conducting this interview.
You're arguing with the wrong person here.
Do you understand what the Blue Ocean event is?
Are you going to let me answer or not?
Do you understand?
Yeah. You're arguing with the wrong person.
No, but if you answer that question, do you understand anything about the scientific consequences of what 2 degrees means? It means 1 billion people.
Liam, stop.
1 billion people on the move. Do you understand what that means? It means the destruction of our economy.
You can keep talking,
it means the loss of your pensions,
because
Philip.
I am conducting this interview.
Right.
So, Liam,
your pension will be destroyed.
Can we cut Liam's mic, please, and I'm going to ask the question? Because, Liam, this is my show, mate. I ask the questions here, OK? Your mic is cut because you're going to be polite and you're not going to act like a petulant schoolchild for once, and you're going to let me ask the question and you can respond. Philip has made a point in his letter that actually it doesn't matter how much we do in this country, because until countries like China, India, and emerging economies in Africa actually play their part, even if we reduce our carbon emissions to 0% of global emissions, it will make no difference at all to global temperatures. Liam, now you can respond like a good boy.
Look, I'm asking Philip a basic question about climate science.
I won't let him answer.
No, and well, you haven't answered the question.
Just because I can't get a word in edgeways.
Well, do you understand what the consequences of 2 degrees?
Liam, you don't seem to understand.
No, I'm going to ask the question.
Answer them, mate.
2 degrees C. 2 degrees C. 2 degrees C means 1 billion people on the move. What does 1 billion people on the move mean? 1,000 million people on the move. It means war. It means slaughter. It means the rape of women. It means the unimaginable suffering.
Liam,
and that doesn't happen. That doesn't happen in a vacuum. This doesn't happen in a vacuum, Dan. Okay, and this has consequences for every single person in the United Kingdom. It means the loss of pensions.
Liam,
it means the destruction of our economy.
Can we cut Liam's mic now because he's had a chance to respond, and I'm going to ask the next question. Liam
informed about the consequences of this country is facing in terms of the climate crisis.
A debate is that you actually have to listen to both sides. Philip, the point that you were making is that yes, there could be consequences, but it's nothing to do with UK carbon emissions, which are already down to less than 1% of global emissions, right? So surely campaigners like Liam should be focusing their attention on China and India and these emerging African nations.
To be perfectly frank, Liam's making my point for me, because if people can't see what lunatics these people are, then, you know, they're doing a far better job than...
I'm furious that the political class... I'm furious that the political class laugh at the absolute destruction that this country faces and the consequences. And the consequences that this country faces and the inability of our political class, or the guts, or the cowardice that it displays by refusing to face up to the consequences.
Do you concede that, as Philip points out in this letter that has gone viral to a constituent, do you concede that the UK has cut its carbon emissions by almost half over the past 30 years?
Well, I mean, there's loads of things that you need to take into account. What about all the crap that we buy from China? What about all the stuff that we buy from China? What about that? But look, it's about having some honour and some integrity. We led the world into the Industrial Revolution, and now we've got a responsibility to lead the way out. And what Philip ignores is he has this nihilistic attitude that citizens all around the world are going to refuse to accept what their governments are doing. This is going on all around the world. I accept what Philip's saying, but what he refuses to accept is that citizens all over the world are going to refuse to accept the destruction of their young people, and people all over the world are going to rise up to
that actually the actions of an organisation like Insulate Britain are actually turning off your constituents. It's actually hardening them.
The actions of Insulate Britain are going to happen.
That was to Philip. That was to Philip. I don't know if you heard Liam.
Sorry, Liam. I think the point is that Liam and Insulate Britain do these ridiculous tactics, which are counterproductive to Liam's cause. I mean, thinking that you know sticking yourself on the road and disrupting everybody's lives is going to improve your campaign is mind-boggling to me. But the point is, the reason why they do it is because they know they haven't got public support for their views. That's why they do it. If they had public support for their views, they'd be able to win the argument through the ballot box, which is in a democracy.
I mean, Liam, you look at this, Liam, you look at this footage now, Liam, you must accept that you have turned off the vast majority of the British public who now despise your organisation, who think you're a bunch of eco-terrorist lunatics.
Well, a poll by ESG for consumers found that 71% of the UK public thought climate change was their biggest concern.
No, I'm talking about Insulate Britain.
Well, I'm talking about the effects of climate change.
Don't care what you're talking about. You're here to answer my question.
The British public are concerned about their children. That's what they're concerned about. And people like Philip are in the complete minority in terms of what the British public are actually interested in.
And I've got
no
elections have you won?
I've got no idea where he gets his basis from that the UK public are just going to accept the destruction of their children. That's not going to happen. And people are going to start seeing more and more. Insulate Britain and organisations like it are going to spring up all over the world because people are refusing to accept that governments just get away with this blatant
You're not
criminality.
doing yourself a good service. You're doing yourself a disservice, I would argue. A couple of final questions to you, Liam. Have you insulated your own home appropriately yet?
I don't own a home, Dan. If you bothered to do any journalism,
where you're living?
You'd know that I don't own any homes. I never have done.
Well, we know that the home where you were living was not properly insulated.
You don't know anything. You get educated by The Sun. by journalists in The Sun who are also selling out everybody in this country with their misinformation. They should be telling the British public about what the Chatham House report is saying, that if...
No, I'm not asking you about that. I'm just asking you if you've insulated where you
don't want to tell your viewers about the reality of the situation.
Yes, I do.
No,
but I'm just asking you if you've insulated
you're giving
your
them
own
misinformation
home
about the reality of the situation.
You're not prepared to answer that question?
Well, I'm here to say to the people watching this that if you want to know what the weather is doing, look out of the window, OK? Don't believe the lies and the misinformation that cowards like some of our MPs and people in the media are telling you. Understand that this crisis is real, and the only way that we're going to get out of it is if we go into civil resistance against this government, which means sitting on the motorways. And if you're tired of austerity, come and sit on the motorways. If you're tired that they can't fill the shelves up, come and sit on the motorways.
You need to grow up.
If you're tired,
get a real job, insulate your own home,
come and sit
and
on
then
the
maybe the British people will start taking you seriously.
If you care about
because
this country,
right now they're not taking you seriously.
On the motorways of the United Kingdom, that's the only place for a true Democrat to be at the moment, is on the motorways with Insulate Britain. That's what I've come on here to say.
Election, Liam.
Because that's full of crooks like you. It's full of crooks like you. I'm here to tell the British public that the only place to be, if you care about your family, is to come and sit on the motorways of this country and go into resistance.
At least you didn't walk out this time, Liam.
Criminality that is going on everywhere, up and down this land. But I think you're going to need to
improve your interview technique a little bit. That was Insulate Britain spokesman Liam Norton and Conservative MP for Shipley, Philip Davies. Thank you both. So who do you agree with? Feedback from you now. David on Twitter says, COP26 was a huge all-expenses-paid jolly for thousands of already overpaid government officials. Joss on Twitter says, political leaders are hypocrites in defence of the royals. They were talking about protecting the planet long before it became fashionable. And William via Twitter says, private jets, 80 cars just for Biden. It was an absolute joke. Explain to me what they did in Glasgow that couldn't have been done on Zoom. And your verdict is now in. 93% of you agree that COP26 is an orgy of hypocrisy, while 7% of you think it is not. Coming up, is Twitter's silencing of anyone who dares challenge COVID orthodoxy a danger to democracy? The latest victim of big tech censorship, Bernie Spofforth, tells her story at 10:20. But first, why are the lockdown-loving mainstream media parroting NHS England Chief Executive Amanda Pritchard's fake news about COVID hospitalisations? The positive Professor Carol Sikora gives his expert take next.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk. Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
And we're back. Time now to bring in the positive Professor Carol Sikora. Earlier today, Sky, ITV and the I newspaper were all showing news articles wrongly stating that hospitals were seeing 14 times more COVID patients than this time last year. They followed this quote by the Chief Executive of NHS England.
We have had 14 times the number of people in hospital with COVID than we saw this time last year.
Now, that quote by Amanda Pritchard is wrong. The news articles were wrong. There are around 4,000 fewer COVID patients in hospital than this time last year, not more, certainly not 14 times more. The stories were fake news and have since been removed. But what's going on? Let me bring in Carol Sikora now, because Carol, it feels to me like the mainstream media, the broadcast media in particular, are obsessed with this narrative. They can't get away from this narrative of COVID cases and hospitalizations soaring. And the facts on the ground simply don't back that up.
You know, it's propaganda we're getting. It's reminiscent of the Stalin era in Russia. And what Amanda's done is fall into a trap. The people around us said, look, we've got to get more people get the booster. What can we do? We've got to get a shocking statistic out. So they came up with this. The fact is, and now she's backtracked, of course, what she was comparing was August data compared with August data last year, which is totally different. And then
we're in November.
We don't have any more recent data. We have data on her own website from the 5th of November, 4 days ago. So clearly wrong, clearly an embarrassment. But what she was trying to do, I'd like to think in good faith, was persuade people to have the booster, and this was the best way she could do it. Even the pictures were fake. Those ambulances were not this year's ambulance. They were last year's ambulances, queuing to get in. There haven't been pictures like that. Having said all that, Dan, there is a bit of blame shifting here. Every year since I've been a medical student, that was many, many years ago, winter pressure come at about this time, you know. Ambulances pitch up, elderly people, chest infection, not necessarily COVID, all sorts of stuff, flu, pneumonia and so on. And then coupled to this is the care home crisis. So the number of care home beds are falling and the number of people working in care homes is dropping. So there's nowhere for them to go after they've had antibiotics and oxygen in hospital. So the hospitals are getting clogged up. So she's right. Winter pressures this year will be worse, not due to COVID, but due to the fact we've got chronic lack of capacity that you don't have in Western Europe.
Understand that, and thank you so much for explaining the truth about the situation. Now let's talk about cases, Carol, because I've been off air for 2 weeks, and it has been so disturbing for me to see the rest of the media be determined to stick with this incorrect narrative that cases in the UK are soaring. Carol, they're not. They're plummeting. So where are the Robert Pestons of this world to correct the facts?
I just don't know. Both Sky and BBC are perhaps the two worst. I looked on Sky the other day, and it was presented 30,000 on Saturday, new cases. Now, 30,000 is a lot better than a week ago when it was 40,000. It's dropping. Instead of saying that, it was a shock horror. The cases are going up. It's now 30,000 a day. And most of these cases are just mild infections. They're not serious in any way, not hospitalization, certainly not deaths. Things are getting better. I can't see the motivation. I don't think it particularly sells newspapers or television channels to keep reporting this sort of exaggeration of where COVID is taking us.
What annoys me so much, Carol, is if the cases had still been rising, you just know there would have been this growing drumbeat for the government to introduce further curbs on our liberties. And I feel it's just so dishonest that they're now talking about the fact that cases are dropping. And we need to understand why they're dropping.
Exactly. And they're dropping because the predictive models, you remember the imperial models, the curves, the actuals are far below even the most optimistic prediction. It's far below it. And it's coming to an end. It's going to drop much more precipitously over the next 3 weeks. Even according to the models, we're through the worst of it now. It's true, and maybe Pritchard was making that point, winter is coming, and that will lead to a whole load of other factors in there.
Well, I'm sorry, Carol, I'm not giving Amanda Pritchard the benefit of the doubt. She's actually on my watch list now because she is the chief executive of NHS England. This is a woman who we should trust. And if she is going to spout to the British public facts that are provably untrue, to try and make us even more scared about COVID when the population has already been terrified for the past 20 months. I'm sorry, I am going to call this woman out and I'm going to say something that will be unpopular in certain quarters. Carol, this woman is dangerous. Give us the facts, Amanda Pritchard. Do not give us an irresponsible scare story. I'm not having it and I'm going to call it out on this show.
Quite right. And I think the same goes for Amanda has not got any medical background. She's been a through and through NHS administrator all her career, very successful, of course.
Yeah, of course.
And,
a bureaucrat, typical NHS
The story
bureaucrat.
was written for her by people that had a story to tell. They wrote the conclusion and then made up the facts to go with the conclusion.
Well, I know, but she should check her own facts, Carol. I'm sorry, she should check her own facts. And at the end of the day, she is responsible for what she says to the British public, just like I'm responsible for the facts and the figures that I put out on this show. So, Amanda Pritchard, you've made a very bad start, in my opinion. Let's have some truth from you. Let's have some honesty from you and stop trying to scare us. It's not going to work this time. Maybe it worked last winter. It's not going to work anymore in a country that is over 80% double vaccinated. Carol Sikora, the positive professor. Keep on coming back to us with all of that good news, Carol. We'll speak again next week.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. For coming up, are big tech going mad with COVID censorship? Businesswoman Bernie Spofforth joins me for her first interview since Twitter banned her for simply questioning vaccine passports. That's a terrifying one. But next, will the latest Tory sleaze scandal do real damage to Boris Johnson's government? Tonight's Outsider, Darren Grimes, investigates after the break.
Hello again. A lot of cloud overnight for many of us, and rain is sinking south across northern parts of the country. But it will be milder as a result, and then it turns drier and brighter during Tuesday. Here are the weather fronts that are sinking south overnight. In between them, a slice of mild Atlantic air that contains an awful lot of cloud, some thick and low cloud across many parts of the country through the night. And these outbreaks of more persistent rain, initially for Scotland and Northern Ireland, and then sinking into parts of northern England and Wales by the end of the night. Clearing skies, meanwhile, behind the weather fronts for northern Scotland. A lot fresher here as we begin Tuesday, but mild and fairly dismal elsewhere. A lot of cloud, some of that low cloud covering hills, and some spots of rain and drizzle just about anywhere in the west, but most persistent over the hills of northern England and Wales. That's accompanied by a keen breeze around Irish Sea coasts. But for Scotland and Northern Ireland, brighter skies, albeit with blustery showers in the north and west. Further south again, and a misty start for southeast England, but sunny spells coming through later with highs of 15 or 16 Celsius. However, we keep the area of cloud and some outbreaks of rain into Tuesday night. It really just lingers across southern parts of the UK with some heavier bursts of rain at times for the Midlands, Wales and the southwest. Northern England, Scotland and Northern Ireland meanwhile see clear spells and just a few showers as we start off Wednesday. But in the south it is a gloomy picture once again. A mild start but with some outbreaks of rain about. That rain steadily pushing south and easing during the day on Wednesday, but it stays fairly grey and damp in places. Brighter skies in the north with some showers about, but actually plenty of dry and fine weather. Thursday's looking mostly dry, but with a lot of cloud in many places. Friday, more unsettled weather in the north.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
And we're back. Darren Grimes is tonight's outsider. Tory sleaze, a phrase we haven't heard in a good couple of decades, that is, until a slew of Conservative Party controversies in recent weeks, most notably former MP Owen Paterson's cash for lobbying scandal and the Cabinet's attempt to get him off the hook. Boris Johnson wasn't in much of a mood to address the fallout from the scandal today.
I've said what I've said about the particular case of one MP who, as I said, suffered over the course of a long investigation, suffered a personal tragedy, has now resigned his seat, and I really don't have any more to add to that. If there's anything positive to come out of the whole thing, it is that, as far as I can make out, the Speaker is determined to try to move us all forward with a system whereby we can have a cross-party approach, which is what we were trying to achieve last week.
Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer, however, couldn't wait to have his say in the Commons today.
Last week, the Prime Minister damaged himself. And despite the bravery of some members opposite, he damaged his party. But most importantly, he damaged our democracy.
Darren, look, this feels to me like a story for the Westminster bubble, and they're obsessed with it. But do you think it's starting to cut through with the British public?
Yeah, I actually really do, Dan. I mean, I think this story is quite extraordinary and it risks exposing bumbling Boris, who has, I think, up until now performed so many U-turns. He's starting to look like a three-wheeled shopping trolley destined for the political U-bend, Dan. And I think there's a very simple reason that explains why Boris Johnson is the leader of the Conservative Party, and that's because he's seen as a born winner, right? He can keep Tory MPs in their seats. If that starts to look less guaranteed, I reckon they'll quickly turn on him, and we're even seeing some of that action by backbenchers today. Mark Harper being one of them, former government whip, came out and said actually he thinks the government should apologise, Dan. Pretty extraordinary stuff. I mean, I was reminded of that Harold Macmillan line, former Prime Minister, of events, dear boy, events, when asked what the most likely thing was to collapse governments. But this, Dan, wasn't an unpredictable event. This wasn't something that nobody could have predicted, right? You don't have to be some political Nostradamus to reckon that if you try and fix the rules after one of your backbench MPs has been found to have fallen foul of them, then you're going to get accused of sleaze. You're going to get accused of fiddling things. And it was entirely foreseeable.
Darren, though, you cannot tell me that this despicable current Labour regime would do any better. I mean, you've got Claudia Webb, one of their former MPs, literally hanging on to her seat despite being convicted in a court of law of threatening all sorts against an innocent woman. I mean, do not tell me, Darren, that we would get less sleaze from Starmer's Labour Party, because I just don't believe that.
Well, absolutely not. And I mean, they're all at it as far as their second jobs are concerned as well, right? And I think there are legitimate questions to be answered about the lack of appeals process when an MP is found to have done wrong by the Committee on Lobbying and such things like that. But that's not to say that nobody in number 10 shouldn't have said, hang on a minute. We are handing opposition MPs, like you've just mentioned, the greatest gift in sleaze-based headlines if we do this, right? Why did nobody predict in number 10 that it would go down like a bag of sick with voters?
Okay,
and back,
so for you, it's an issue of political management.
Well, it's actually an issue when you've got the likes of Sir Geoffrey Cox QC making £400,000 a year outside of Parliament, Dan, and barely bothering to speak in the House of Commons. We are having these conversations about those MPs because of this story having cut through. And I think MPs, basically the public are asking, Dan, what on earth they're paying their MPs for if they've got all the time to have these outside jobs, if they've got all the time to mess about outside of Parliament, instead of actually focusing on their issues for their MPs.
Well, Darren, I always used to believe that MPs should have no other jobs outside of Parliament. However, in that case, don't you just risk encouraging even more professional politicians, and then you miss out on some people who have potentially been very successful in business or their particular line of work?
I think many people, though, watching this show tonight, Dan, will be thinking, because that was sort of suggested by the father of the House, who's a Tory MP, Sir Peter Bottomley. He suggested that pay rises for MPs would be the solution. And I'm sorry, Dan, but I bet most people watching your show will be absolutely gobsmacked by the brass neck, or should I say the gold-plated neck in that gilded chamber of theirs. They're earning over 81 grand, right? That places them in the top 3% of earners in this country. Voters must be thinking, we pay MPs quite enough, thank you very much.
Not to mention the expenses and the free travel and the accommodation allowances and all of that which they get on top of it. And by the way, Sir Ed Davey, the Liberal Democrat leader, remember them? The Lib Dems? I think they're still around.
Who?
You know, he's been leading the charge against this so-called Tory sleaze, and then it turns out he's making a whole load of cash on the side as well. So, Darren, all I'm saying is you can't trust any of them. You cannot trust any of them. But do not tell me the Labour Party or the Lib Dems are any less sleazy than the Tories. This is what most politicians are like. And Darren Grimes, that's why you're going to be our outsider keeping an eye on all of this. Thank you so much for being here tonight, Darren. It's 10 o'clock. This is Dan Wootton. Tonight and still to come, businesswoman Bernie Spofforth gives her first interview on why she was banned by Twitter for simply stating the facts on vaccine passports. In Uncancelled, Toby Young reveals why lockdown skeptics like him have lost the argument, though he still hopes there'll be no plan B. In a new reloaded Greatest Britain and Union Jackass, my panel will compete to have their nominee crowned the winner. And next, is Matt Hancock right to back mandatory jabs for NHS workers, regardless of whether or not it costs them their jobs? And should Meghan be using her royal title to lobby US senators? We'll debate that and more in our media buzz. We'll also be able to see what's in tomorrow's newspapers before everyone else. Just one thing first, though. I am so delighted that after nearly 20 months, we can finally see this dual takeoff by a British Airways and Virgin Atlantic flight from Heathrow to mark the resumption of regular flights for Brits to the US. Now, the two airlines put aside their decade-long rivalries as the US opened its borders to fully vaccinated UK visitors. Airlines and the travel industry agree with me that this has been far too long in coming. But let's celebrate the good news tonight. We can finally go stateside again, and I can't wait. I've already booked my tickets, actually, for next year. First, though, before the media buzz, it's the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Good evening. Your GB News headlines this hour. MPs have today held an emergency debate on the government's vote to block the suspension of the MP Owen Paterson and to overhaul parliamentary standards. The Commons Speaker, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, says changes to misconduct proceedings must be done with cross-party support. The Prime Minister, who wasn't there today, was visiting a hospital in Northumberland, and he said he does take accusations of government corruption seriously. But Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer accused Boris Johnson of corroding the trust between voters and politicians.
Last week, the Prime Minister damaged himself. And despite the bravery of some members opposite, he damaged his party. But most importantly, he damaged our democracy.
The new chair and director of Yorkshire County Cricket Club has apologised to Azim Rafiq over his allegations of institutional racism. The club has also reached a financial settlement with Azim over his employment tribunal against the club. Lord Patel has vowed to oversee urgent and seismic change to make the club inclusive for all future players.
Racism or any form of discrimination is not banter. It's simply not acceptable. We're sorry for what you and your family experienced and the way in which we've handled this. What happened to you must never happen again.
At COP26, the former US President Barack Obama says larger nations must shoulder more of the burden of fixing the global climate crisis. Speaking in Glasgow, he said if we don't act now, then it's going to be too late for smaller island nations.
But there is one thing that should transcend our day-to-day politics and normal geopolitics, and that is climate change. It's not just that we can't afford to go backward, we can't afford to stay where we are. The world has to step up, and it has to step up now.
And some good news for you tonight. An injured man who was trapped in a cave in South Wales for more than 2 days has finally been rescued. Almost 250 people joined the rescue efforts to find the 74-year-old man who'd been unable to move after falling into one of the UK's largest caves at the Brecon Beacons. He's been taken to hospital for treatment for non-life-threatening injuries. And as you've been hearing, the UK travellers can now fly to the United States for the first time in nearly 2 years. The US has opened its borders to fully vaccinated visitors, but they must take a COVID test within 3 days of arrival. British Airways and Virgin Atlantic synchronised their departures from London's Heathrow Airport this morning to mark the special occasion. You're right up to date. I'm back in an hour.
And we're back, and it's time for tomorrow's news tonight in our Media Buzz. Let's kick off with the very first look at the front pages. So this is hot off the press. The Independent. Boris Johnson is running scared over the Tory sleaze storm. That's after his kicking in the Commons. Plus, the publication reports on how pollution is bringing further anguish to war-torn Syria. And in the top right there, Diane Abbott is sounding off, branding COP26 too white and privileged. Get me out of here is the Metro's headline. It reports the Prime Minister has been accused of running scared over sleaze by using a hospital photo opportunity to get him out of a debate with MPs furious over his failed bid to change the rules on standards. Now my superstar panel back with me. It is the columnist and broadcaster, Carol Malone, the senior reporter at the newspaper, Benjamin Butterworth, and the social commentator, Esther Kraku. And I know all three have strong views on this one. Matt. Can to maintain its duty to protect patients and in doing so protect the freedoms we cherish so much. So, is Matt Hancock right? Should we force jabs on healthcare workers? And Esther Kraku, surely the point is, we're talking about this crisis. You know, we've got Amanda Pritchard, the NHS chief executive, as I said in the last hour, trying to terrify us all about what's to come. Are they really going to allow thousands and thousands of NHS workers who've chosen not to have the jab to walk out? And remember, Esther, these are medical professionals. Some of them have had the jab because they know they've got natural immunity.
I don't think anyone on the panel will agree with me, but it makes me very uncomfortable, the idea of forcing anyone to get the jab. I do think while I don't really want to hear anything from Matt Hancock after that disgusting video, I do think his case is reasonable, but it's one, we can't afford to sack NHS workers, period, because there's just not enough of them. And two, I don't think it's enough time. Where is the compassion or the understanding of people that are apprehensive of taking the jab that's just been out for a year? I mean, it's completely understandable. Even if they do have natural immunity, people that are apprehensive to take the jab, yeah, it's fair.
Carol Malone scoffing at you. Carol, why are you scoffing?
It's just that all throughout the pandemic last year, we were told time and again, protect the NHS, protect the NHS, keep your distance, wear masks. So what we've done is now we've all had this vaccine, and yet the NHS, people who are working there, many of them won't get the vaccine to protect. Well, but it doesn't matter. The ones that haven't, how as a doctor or a nurse can you think it's okay not to get this vaccination? You know,
addressing their concerns.
What about the concerns? They're not the only people with concerns, Esther. We all have the concerns about this vaccine, but we've done it anyway.
Everyone should feel comfortable taking it. Right, we don't want to.
If your job,
say you have to, you know, we'll destroy your life. We'll stop you having a job if you don't put this forward.
If your job is taking care of society's most vulnerable, and that is if they're ill or if they're old, if that is your job, you have to protect those.
Okay, Carol, but what if you're a doctor or nurse who has had COVID? And as a result has natural immunity. You do appreciate, Carol,
immunity
natural immunity is the most effective way to fight COVID. And these are medical professionals. Shouldn't we trust them?
If they have natural immunity, why are they still wearing masks and gowns?
They've always worn masks and gowns.
Why? Why?
Because it's their job.
To protect their patients from the mask, to protect patients from the droplets that come out of their mouth. So if they're doing all of that to protect patients, why wouldn't they have the vaccine? And anyway, apart from anything else, this virus is one of the most dangerous on earth. It has killed hundreds, hundreds, if not thousands of their colleagues. So why aren't they getting the jab?
First of all, this virus is not the most dangerous.
It is a killer virus, Esther.
No, but it has a 99% recovery rate.
I'm sorry, do you remember the thousands that were dying every day last year?
But the UK, the population...
So that's all right then?
6 million people.
It's all right.
No, I'm talking about statistically.
Benjamin, you actually go one step further, don't you?
Arrested.
You actually think that these staff members who refuse to be jabbed should be treated in a terrible way.
Well, I think they're irresponsible, and I think they're letting down the people that they claim to care about.
So what should happen to them? You want them sacked. That's what you want.
They should be in prison.
As we've seen from what Matt Hancock points out in his Telegraph article about what happened in France, actually only 0.1% of the workforce left because they went and got the jab when they were made to have it. And the truth is, Esther, you've spoken quite a lot actually. The truth is that when you talk about the questions about whether they should get the jab, whether they're unsure of it, whether it's new, well, actually, we're 10 or 11 months into this vaccine. It's absolutely clear that it works. It's absolutely clear that it is safer than getting COVID. And it's what I would say to those people is that if you've made this decision after 11 months, then nothing is going to convince
you are with an authoritarian society.
No, it's how comfortable I am with people taking responsibility for themselves and those around them. And you know, the question I would put to Esther or to Dan,
people, Benjamin,
I don't trust people that
about
the
what
vaccine,
they put in their own body.
Dan,
let me say,
anybody can take responsibility for what they put in their own bodies, unless they are taking care of vulnerable sick people.
Of principle.
principle.
Your principle.
We do not enforce in a free society that anyone has a form of medical treatment.
Doesn't matter.
Wrong.
Your principle doesn't matter when you're dealing with sick and dying people. If your principles matter so much,
principles go out the morals and the health service.
Move back off the front line then. Do not be dealing with people who could die if they get COVID. They're in there with...
if they have natural immunity? You're not making sense.
Natural immunity doesn't last forever.
It lasts longer than the vaccine, Carol.
It doesn't last forever. So say they got it last year, 12 months
What if they got it last week?
But also, Dan, as you know...
You can't make arbitrary rules like that for people.
You're wanting to make an arbitrary
Italy
rule.
and France, because I think people outside can do what they want. I still think they're irresponsible, but I think if you're a medic, I think if you're taking care of society's most vulnerable, you have to do that. And all this, the nonsense that I've read about them resisting it, they're saying, well, the vaccine's new. It's new for all of us, but we've all had it because we were told to protect the NHS.
These people are trading on what we did to get their freedom.
Yes.
They are being irresponsible and they are being selfish. And actually, it makes me question what other things they do. You know, would I want an elderly relative or an elderly friend to be treated by someone that doesn't refuse the vaccine because they may well be behaving in all sorts of other ways that are irresponsible, and I would worry about that person being in a position of care.
If you were ill, you would go to a doctor and trust his opinion on what you think.
Or hers.
His or her opinion on what you think your treatment should be. But you don't trust that same doctor with medical experience.
That's entirely different.
You're harping on about follow the science. You don't trust that same doctor with medical training to make decisions over their own body.
Any response?
Not when you're caring for sick and vulnerable people. Is this
Why
really
should they be
so
put at
hard
risk?
to
Yes,
understand?
explain that to us. It doesn't only go in your direction. Why should that vulnerable person who has practically no control over who cares for them, why should they be put at risk?
Benjamin, we live in...
They will have, but there's still a 10% risk they'll die.
We live in a society...
No, answer the question. Why should they be put at risk?
Are able to make their own choices about what they put in their body.
Not when you're caring for other people.
Fundamental principle
Dan,
for me.
as Carol is saying,
fundamental principle for
the
me.
vulnerable person on the receiving end of care who is very ill does not have that choice. And it is a responsibility of a civilised society that we ensure the people caring for them are doing everything to help.
Let me tell you, Benjamin. It is not a civilised society if folk are threatened with the loss of their job because they refuse a medical procedure.
This is just
When I go and have an operation, Carol, I make a choice. My doctors will tell me, this is the risk profile. There is this chance of dying. It might be 1 in 10,000. That is my right as a patient to make that choice.
And I think it's the right of every comparing apples and pears. They're two entirely different things. And when I said before, you know, many of their colleagues have died, hundreds if not thousands, and you would think that alone would make them get the vaccine.
Well, I presume you think they should all have compulsory flu jabs then too.
Yeah, why not?
Okay,
yes.
this is where we go. This is where we go. Do you understand where we are going?
No, listen, let me say, if you give the flu to an 80-year-old person, that person is very likely to die.
Okay.
So, so on that
let's
basis...
just jab, not give anyone the choice.
If you're caring for sick people, you have to be responsible, and it's totally irresponsible not to get jabbed.
Well, look, I want to move on because the Duchess of Sussex has been cold-calling US politicians on private numbers to influence their decisions, using her royal title as leverage. This is an astonishing story. So Meghan apparently startled Republican lawmakers when she unexpectedly called them to lobby for federal paid parental leave. One senator, Susan Collins, told Politico, "I was happy to talk to her, but I'm more interested in what the people of Maine are telling me about it." Absolutely right. Now, members of the royal family are meant to keep out of politics, but I've said for a long time, I've spoken to lots of people close to Meghan. She seriously believes, I mean, she may be delusional, but this woman seriously believes she may end up in the White House one day. So that's what this is about, Carol Malone. This is the start of a US political career.
This is the first step in a long walk to the White House.
Let me ask you this. Why does she not pick up the phone then and say, "Hello, I'm Meghan Markle. I want to be
I'm going to tell
president one day." Instead, she calls up Carol and she says, "I'm Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex."
The thing is, and I think that's what has angered. I mean, let's kind of go back a bit. This is the woman who said she wanted out of royal life, nothing to do with the royals, nothing to do with the establishment, and here she is pimping stripping of her title as to open a door to get into the thing. And I think what's angered Americans, and I read one senator today saying, I will listen to anything she has to say as an American citizen. I will not listen to what she has to say as the Duchess of Sussex, because nobody in England has
She hates the royal family. But Esther, I like this. You actually want to defend Meghan today, and I want to hear why.
I'm not defending her, but first of all, why are we surprised? I mean, does the former Duchess of Sussex...
But you like her front for having done this, right? You think it shows some sort of determination and pluck?
Absolutely not. I think she is moving in the same vein that we've always seen. This is not surprising behaviour. I'm more upset with the fact that she still has the title to be able to say that.
Oh, yeah, it should be gone.
I'm not surprised she's using it. I mean, is anyone really shocked?
By the way, can we just say, has anyone noticed Esther's hair tonight? It's fantastic.
Stunning.
She looks like a movie star, doesn't she?
She looks absolutely sensational.
More of a movie star than
speaking of
Meghan
Benjamin
Markle.
Butterworth, though, not so stunning in pink. But I'm joking. You look fabulous as well, Benjamin.
Not as good as Esther, though.
Benjamin, do you want to stand up for Meghan?
Well, do you know what? Look, I don't actually think that she does want to be the president, not in any serious
way.
No, but the reason I think that is because politicians have a turbulent time. They are constantly held to account for what they say. They're criticised, and the last thing she wants is accountability or criticism.
But she's
And so
self-deluded.
I think she wants the status that being a royal gives you without any of the consequences that being an elected politician comes with.
Why does she still have the title? That is where I'm confused.
Why not just give it back? I mean, Piers Morgan today made a big thing on Twitter saying, take it off at the Queen, should not allow this to go on. And if this doesn't... Well,
I completely agree.
I completely agree. The Queen off,
I've been saying for months and months and months, the title must go. These two people are charlatans. They are chancers. They are prepared to railroad over the British royal family. They don't give a damn about the Queen. They don't give a damn about the reputation that she has built up over decades and decades and decades. And Benjamin Butterworth, they make me ill.
Well, do you know what? I actually think if she's going to lobby in the political way that she has, as this story reveals, that rules out any title from the royal family, because that's not what we bestow on them. We don't do that to have the political...
Strip them of their titles. Final point.
I remember you talking to Thomas Markle, Meghan's dad, and he did say that he doesn't believe she wants to be president because she doesn't want that accountability.
He's not been in touch with her for years. She doesn't talk to her. So how does he know what she wants?
Well, do you know what? It's interesting you raised Thomas Markle. I think we've got to get him on later in the week to find out what on earth he thinks about this show, because of course he is over there in California. So Thomas, we will come to you and we will speak to you later in the week, hopefully. Now, when you think of retirement homes, what comes to mind? Tired lino floors, threadbare furniture, wilting sandwiches? Well, not in this so-called later living home, which is planning to shake things up. So check this out. This is the new Orions in Chelsea, which offers a Himalayan rock salt sauna, wine cellar and cinema, but it comes at a big cost, £3,000 a week. Carol Malone, are you thinking of retiring there? I know it's a few years off.
I want to go there tomorrow. But 3,000 quid a week is normal price for a care home, isn't it? Generally.
Well, yeah.
It's not exactly that far off a normal care home that don't look like that.
I mean, honestly, it looks like a private members club for pensioners. I think it looks fantastic. I wish I could afford a flat that nice.
I know.
God.
That's our superstar panel. Far from shy and retiring tonight. Carol Malone, Benjamin Butterworth, Esther Krakow, do stand by, because coming up, how can we fight back against big tech censorship of inconvenient COVID truths? Businesswoman Bernie Spofforth tells how she took on Twitter and won in her first interview. That's next. Plus, should the BBC licence fee be frozen to help us cope with the cost of living? I'll debate that with my panel in the Media Buzz.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Now, regular viewers will know I've said for some time that big tech censorship is one of the most chilling threats to democracy and freedom of the press. Shocking evidence of that while I was off after top businesswoman Bernie Spofforth, an anti-lockdown campaigner, was permanently deleted by Twitter. Her crime? Tweeting this. It's illogical to push the narrative that the vaccinated are protected from COVID, but not protected from the unvaccinated. It's also dense. But you know that, right? Hashtag COVID-19, hashtag no vaccine passports. Within hours, Bernie's allies had the hashtag reinstate Bernie trending, and Twitter did eventually relent. But to tell her story for the first time, Bernie Spofforth is with me now. Bernie, great to speak to you. This was such a shocking case of big tech censorship, because what you said in that tweet is provably true, right?
Yeah, it is completely true. And it's exactly what Boris Johnson had said and the CDC had said and lots of other media outlets had already said. So there was absolutely no reason to suspend an entire account for that.
There wasn't. And what's so interesting is that Twitter reversed its decision only after you ended up being one of the biggest trending topics on their own site that day. But Bernie, I worry about all of the folk that don't have high-profile people on Twitter to campaign to reinstate Bernie in your case.
And that's a really big problem, because there are millions and millions of people all over the country that have the same opinion I do. They're normal people, and they're just questioning the government's narrative. All they want is to have the truth given to them, and they're not getting the truth because they're getting one side of the government narrative that tells them a particular route, and they're supposed to just believe that. Today, for example, the head of the NHS was printed in numerous media outlets, including Sky News, including the BBC, I think it was ITV, saying that COVID hospitalizations were 14 times higher currently than they were last year at exactly the same time. And that's demonstrably not true. There are 4,500 fewer patients today than there were this time last year. So when you can see that the government narrative is lying to you and you've got 200 followers, it's incredibly frustrating. You're talking and no one's listening.
Exactly. So big tech is going to come for you if you're a lockdown skeptic. But if you are a COVID hysteric, and we know there's many of them out there, it doesn't matter if you spout a whole load of untruths to terrify the population. They seem to encourage that. So they're not implementing their so-called rules fairly.
No, and Twitter has become a publisher. Now, it can lie all it likes and say it isn't a publisher, but it is. And once you publish, you become responsible. And there is no balance. And the problem for me is, if you push people who don't agree with you underground, then that narrative becomes dangerous. You must allow people to speak freely. They must have their opinions and be able to talk about it. If you're censored and pushed down, it's a very dangerous place to be.
What's fascinating, though, Bernie, is that you have now become a Twitter sensation. You gained tens of thousands of followers, didn't you, after Twitter suspended you? So they lost out in this case.
Well, actually, that was a very surreal moment because I hadn't realised I'd been banned until I couldn't send any tweets. And then I was horrified. And I looked at my email and it said I had been suspended and hadn't even sworn, hadn't even had a swear word. And I only realised I was back 7 or 8 hours later and actually sat on the loo having a wee. And my phone was just buzzing. And when I got to it, I saw that I'd been reinstated. And the only person I know in the whole world that's been reinstated was Tatiana McGrath. And she would hate me.
She absolutely would. Well, look, congratulations that you're back. Keep fighting the good fight. And I think what your case proved to me, Bernie, is that it's absolutely essential that when good folk who are doing nothing wrong are banned by a big tech giant, it doesn't matter what side of the political spectrum you're on, we all have to shout about it. We all have to yell about it, because otherwise we're going to lose genuinely independent voices from the public discussion.
I really agree with that. And I do know that there were many, many accounts that have been banned. And don't get me wrong, I'm in awe of the amount of support I had. But let's be really clear here. I was the straw that broke the camel's back. This wasn't me. This was everybody. And I know that. And there are many accounts that have been lost that shouldn't have been. And people should be free to say what they want to say, because the market will decide, just like in business. The market will decide.
Exactly. Bernie Spofford, I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much for giving your first interview to us here on GB News. And of course, while I was off, Novara Media was banned by YouTube. Now, I think Novara Media are a bunch of horrendous communists. But do I believe they have a right to a platform on YouTube? Absolutely.
Great,
so I spoke out against that ban as well. And we all have to start doing that. Now, coming up, have lockdown skeptics lost the war of common sense? The great Toby Young weighs in on Uncancelled. But next in the media buzz, should the BBC freeze its licence fee to help stem the cost of living crisis? And why is Tina Turner suing a lookalike? We'll be back with that in just a couple of minutes.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Thank you for staying with us. Let's return to tomorrow's news tonight in our Media Buzz. More front pages have just been delivered, so let's take a first look. The Guardian says Boris Johnson is leading the Tory party through the sewers. That's not a surprise, is it? The paper reports Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has accused the PM of trying to take down the standards watchdog for his personal interests. This is really shocking, actually. The splash in the Daily Telegraph. 11,600 caught COVID in hospital and died. Thousands of patients who went to hospital with other illnesses definitely or probably caught COVID during their stay and subsequently were killed by it, according to hospital data, which has prompted fresh calls for mandatory jabs for NHS staff. Also pictured a baby crying as Belarus pushes thousands of migrants to the EU border in Poland. More about the Tory sleaze row on the front page of The Eye. PM refuses to apologise for tearing up sleaze rules. Plus, the rollout of COVID booster jabs to over 50s in England has ramped up and is now matching the pace of the first vaccine programme. But 5.5 million eligible people have still not had their booster. Benjamin Butterworth is going to be horrified with them. The Daily Mail leads with the latest chapter of Tory sleaze. Tory MP and former Attorney General Geoffrey Cox reportedly earned a fortune from the scandal-ridden tax haven, the Virgin Islands, whilst the Commons was sitting. He took advantage of the lockdown vote by proxy rules while earning over £1 million from outside legal work last year, they report. And more sleaze coverage on the front of the Times. Boris facing a call from his own MPs to show leadership and apologise for attempting to block Owen Paterson's suspension. Plus, an 11 p.m. bedtime has been linked to a healthy heart. Oh my goodness, I finish at 11 o'clock from tonight. Phew! That's according to researchers. Although, you know, I have to tell you, I think watching the brand new GB News show Headliners at 11 o'clock, that's a risk worth taking. The Sun reports Strictly Come Dancing's Adam Peaty was in tears as his partner Katia Jones had an explosive backstage meltdown over what the paper calls their disastrous jive. Do you know one person who's going to be very happy? Adam Peaty's baby mama. Because let me tell you, you don't want your man anywhere near that Katia Jones. She is a man-eater. And I think the best thing for Adam's relationship is they are out of that show, let me tell you. And The Independent says Boris Johnson is running scared over the Tory sleaze storm. That's after his kicking in the Commons. Plus, the publication reports on how pollution is bringing further anguish to war-torn Syria. And in the top right there, we see Diane Abbott sounding off, branding COP26 too white and too privileged. Get me out of here is the Metro's headline. It reports the Prime Minister has been accused of running scared over sleaze by using a hospital photo opportunity to get him out of a debate with MPs furious over his failed bid to change the rules on standards. More on the Media Buzz now with tonight's superstar panel. It's the Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, the senior reporter at the I newspaper Benjamin Butterworth, and the social commentator Esther Kraku. With almost all our daily expenses going up as a result of the cost of living crisis, the BBC may expect to be celebrated for freezing the licence fee, providing you can forget about how callous they were to the over 75s. Now, according to the Sunday Telegraph, the tally tax is expected to remain at £159 a year for the next 2 years following negotiations between the corporation and the government. But with the rise of inflation expected to soar to 4.4% next year, this will mean the BBC will see real-term funding cuts. Personally, I say hallelujah. But I think the government actually needs to go much further when it comes to clipping the wings of the Beeb. Carol, surely now, this is the time when actually Nadine Dorries, this very forceful new culture secretary, needs to say to Boris Johnson, look,
we can't have the licence fee any longer. This has to become a voluntary payment.
It shouldn't be publicly funded at all. They shouldn't be the state broadcaster because they've proved they're incapable of impartiality. You know, they get nearly £4 billion from us, from the taxpayers. They get another £2 billion from commercial things, and over half of everything they make goes on pensions and salaries. Only half of what they get goes on input. And I just think, you know, it is now institutionally biased. We know that it's biased on race. It's biased on terror. It was certainly biased on Brexit. That's for sure. And to me, it's just like
it's biased on climate change now.
Yes.
You know, and net zero. And Benjamin Butterworth.
Can I just say?
Yeah, of course.
To me, it's like the NHS. It's like a massive monolith funded by public money that just eats money up and is not accountable for any of it.
I know. Benjamin Butterworth, apparently Nadine Dorries, according to the Telegraph, reported to have said Nick Robinson just cost the Beeb a whole load of money for that disgraceful interview on the Today programme where he just said to the Prime Minister, stop talking.
And Nadine Dorries is behaving like we live in a dictatorship. You know, the idea that she would attempt to dictate how much money the BBC should get because of an impartial, well-respected political journalist quizzing the Prime Minister is a very dangerous situation to be in. And, you know, I think Nadine Dorries seriously overstepped the mark there, and I know plenty of right-leaning people agree with that.
Because she disagrees with you?
No, because she was saying that the way in which a presenter...
She's on the record, Benjamin, for saying she doesn't believe in the licence fee.
The way in which a political journalist quizzed the Prime Minister during a Prime interview meant that she said that they should lose their money from the government. That undermines the impartiality
That's disingenuous
of the BBC.
because that's making out that the new Culture Secretary hasn't for years campaigned against BBC bias and hasn't for years campaigned against the licence fee. I actually respect Nadine Dorries for getting into this senior role and standing by her beliefs.
I'd like to point out something you just said, which says the BBC should be getting. The BBC shouldn't be getting anything. They should be working for their money. They don't deserve any money from the public. Exactly. Right? Why should other channels be able to compete for our views based on actual legitimate, reasonable and balanced journalism, but the BBC gets to just go by scot-free?
That's complete nonsense. There are far stricter rules on the BBC than any other broadcaster.
What is nonsense about what Esther just said?
There are far stricter rules regarding impartiality on the BBC than every other broadcaster. We know that.
Why doesn't that reflect their journalism?
They don't live up to them.
But Esther just stated a falsehood. She said that they don't have to follow the rules the other do. That's complete nonsense.
Benjamin,
they have to follow strict rules.
We know they don't follow the rules. They've admitted that. The bosses said they were going to sack BBC presenters who broke impartiality rules, like Emily Maitlis, like Gary Lineker. Both of those folks.
They didn't say they were going to sack Gary Lineker. He's not an employee of the BBC, and you've stated you're fine with that in the past.
But more importantly, the public have made their views felt. 1.7 million licences this year lost. The year before, 1.5 million licences lost. And that is simply because it is not impartial, it's taking all of our money, and it's not giving people what they want. It is biased.
The truth is that the campaign against the BBC is more about lining the pockets of certain very rich people who want to get people to pay subscriptions to them. You know, the BBC is £159 a year at the moment. The cheapest Sky deal starts at £312 a year. Netflix, half of which is off the BBC, is £167.
Why don't you believe in the market to provide what is needed when it comes to television? I support private, independent companies like GBNews, for example, to deliver what the British public needs. And this archaic monolith absolutely skews the market. It destroys independent radio stations. It destroys local newspapers. It has to reform.
And plus it wastes millions. You know, they spent nearly 100 million on a new EastEnders set. That's our money. That's our money. They spent 100 million quid on some digital programme,
and believe me,
which was a failure.
Believe me, the set's still as cheap as cardboard, so it didn't work. Now, this next story is a bit of a foreign affair. Get it? Tina Turner, yes, Tina Turner is suing a tribute act based in Germany for looking too much like her. This is Simply the Best singer, who is 81, is duking it out in court with a 30-something called Dorothea Coco Fletcher over her unofficial tribute show. So let's compare them. This is the iconic, the real Tina Turner. And this is Dorothea. She's very good, isn't she? I sort of see what Tina Turner means. But anyway, the real Tina Turner's lawyers argue that Fletcher looks so much like Tina Turner in promotional posters that fans may mistakenly think the real Tina is involved in the show. And the case has now reached Germany's Federal Court of Justice, which will make a ruling in February next year that could radically reshape the multi-billion-dollar tribute act industry. I have to be honest, though, Benjamin Butterworth, this story actually made me really sad, because I would think Tina Turner, in her twilight years, having made more money than she ever needs, would actually just support this tribute act in the way, by the way, that ABBA supported, I know you're very across the story, supported the Bjorn Again tribute act because it really helped build up the love of ABBA around the world again.
Exactly, and in a very unlikely twist, I agree with you.
Oh, that never happens.
I think it's a great
What's gone wrong?
The truth is, Tina Turner's been absolutely clear that she's not going back on stage to sing those songs again. She's done her career. She's left us a great, left us a great legacy. And so the idea that she's trying to sue someone that's so brilliant, I think it's a shame.
How do you disagree?
Completely and utterly. There is only one Tina Turner. She earned the right. She earned the right to her name and to the way her images are used. Do you guys know the
story? But it's not Tina Turner.
Do you know the story of Tina Turner?
Incredible.
Okay.
Incredible.
But
incredible
can I just say, called Anna Mae Bullock, Ike called her Tina so he could own her. So when she left her, when she literally ran away from, she ran away with nothing, and all she asked for in the divorce was her stage name. She gave him all the rights to her singing, to her songs, everything. All she asked for was her name, and that woman's stealing it.
But in that case, you don't believe in tribute acts of any famous stars.
If Tina Turner doesn't want it, she should be allowed to say, I don't want it. It's as simple as that. The woman's an icon.
Karen Malone.
I'm quite angry about that because I love her.
Benjamin Butterworth, Esther Kraku, do stand by, because coming up, how did lockdown skeptics lose the fight for reason? Toby Young has been investigating, and he's next in Uncancelled. Plus, Greatest Britain and Union Jackass returns, but with a big twist. You don't want to miss this. But first, here's what's coming up on the show tomorrow.
Coming up Tuesday on Dan Wootton Tonight, rapper turned social media sensation and voice of the silent Zuby joins me in Uncancelled, and Nigel Farage is back for more What the Farage. Were Channel 4 wrong to cancel actress Sarah Jane Dunn for stripping on OnlyFans? The axed star hits back at bosses as she sits down with me. Plus, political commentator Emma Webb is the outsider. Plus, I'll crown a Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. You'll get to voice your opinion on one of the day's biggest talking points in the clash. And I'll break down the day's top stories and give you a first look at the newspaper front pages with my superstar panel on Tuesday. It's the columnist Emily Carver, the conservative commentator Calvin Robinson, and the author Rebecca Reed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Monday to Thursday on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moreki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday, called To The Point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
Here we go. It's time now for Uncancelled. This is where Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. Tonight, let me bring in Toby Young, who says lockdown skeptics like him and me lost the argument. In a column for The Spectator, he writes,
I was astonished by how many intelligent people just swallowed the government line without subjecting it to proper scrutiny, particularly as lockdowns meant the surrender of our liberty on an unprecedented scale. It was as if such people were yearning for the social solidarity usually available only during wartime. And the flip side of that, denouncing anyone who refused to accept the restrictions, also had wide appeal. Toby, great to have you here on Uncancelled. So this is such an important point for me, because if we lost this argument, how do we win the next one?
Yeah, that's a good question, Dan. I may have slightly exaggerated how ineffective people like you and I were at making the case against lockdowns, because even though I think it is only a small factor in the public beginning to turn on lockdowns and having less appetite for lockdowns now than they have had at any time, I think, in the previous 20 months, I think it may be a factor. We've been making the argument for a long time that lockdowns do very little, if anything, to reduce infections. And I think one of the reasons that argument may have begun to land in the last 3 or 4 months is because Boris was urged in the run-up to Freedom Day not to lift COVID restrictions because the only way to keep the infection rate down was to impose restrictions. And more recently, the argument was made again, if you don't impose restrictions, if you don't at least go to a plan B, if not a full national lockdowns, restrictions, the infections are going to soar. We'll have a crisis in the NHS. Hospitals will be overwhelmed. And on both occasions, both in July and more recently, Boris has remained fairly steadfast. He's been able to resist those voices, that pressure. And we haven't seen infections increase, both in July and more recently. Infections have declined in the absence of restrictions. And that's the argument we've been making for 20 months. You don't need these draconian curtailments of our liberty in order to bring down infections.
Absolutely,
the virus rises and falls fairly organically. And what governments do by way of non-pharmaceutical interventions doesn't appear to make much difference.
I know, but Toby, I think what we really have to battle, though, is the narrative that comes from everywhere, all around the world, that lockdowns were the only way to deal with this. And I'll give you an example, because today there was this brilliant moment where the transatlantic flights opened up again. And I actually got an email in my inbox from Sean Doyle, who's the chairman and the chief executive of British Airways. So this was obviously sent to all British Airways frequent flyers. And obviously, you know, British Airways is a company that has been crippled by these lockdowns and, in my view, completely unnecessary travel restrictions. And in this letter to customers, he said it was the right thing to do to prioritise public health, but we know that the global closures have come at a cost to our economies, our families and our mental health, which is what makes today such a pivotal moment for all of us. And it really depressed me that the start of that sentence, that he's just blindly accepting, even though it completely ruined our business, prioritising public health by locking down was the right thing to do, because I dispute that has been proven.
Yeah, he may well be hoping for, you know, billions of pounds in compensation from the UK government to stop British Airways going bankrupt, and therefore he has to be fairly conciliatory and be careful about the tone he takes. I agree, that's disappointing. You would have thought he, of all people, would have been robust lockdown skeptics, given the damage it's inflicted on his business. But that may be a clue to why we may fare better in future, Dan, in making the case against lockdowns. One of the reasons I think we struggled to make the case to persuade the public earlier during the pandemic is that they hadn't seen the impact of the lockdowns on things like children's education, mental health, the economy, particularly small businesses, the hospitality sector. It takes a while for those things to take effect, to really kick in. And we're beginning to see the effects, the damage caused by those 3 lockdowns now. So it may be that people are more wary, even though the government didn't do a cost-benefit analysis, as the costs are becoming clearer and clearer, as the economy stutters to get back to life, and as we look at our high streets as we emerge from our homes and see them decimated by closures, including, you know, household names like Debenhams. people may begin to realise that the costs of these kinds of draconian hammer blows far outweigh the benefits.
Well, I completely agree. Toby Young, you keep fighting the good fight, because I think there may be a few rocky moments over the next few months. That's all I'm going to say. When you see what the NHS England chief executive is trying to propagate to the public today, I think your website and your voice is going to be utterly critical. So, Toby Young, please do come back soon. But now it is time to reveal today's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. So, with me to nominate theirs, it's my superstar panel, the columnist Carol Malone, senior reporter at the newspaper Benjamin Butterworth, and the social commentator Esther Kraku. So, guys, we're going to do this a little bit differently from now on. I pick the winner, you nominate. So, Carol Malone, who are you nominating to be your Greatest Brit?
OK, mine is mother of two, Kath Tregenna. Kath is a London primary school teacher. She caught a fever a couple of years ago, developed into sepsis. She lost all 4 limbs. Legs below the knee, arms below the elbow. She nearly died. She had like 11 cardiac arrests. Most people would have given up. Most people would never have imagined they could go back to work. This lady fundraised money to get herself these, they're called bionic arms. They're called, what are they called? I've forgotten the name of them. But anyway, she got these bionic arms because she knew she couldn't work with the hooks that the NHS gave her. They're called hero arms. And thanks to those bionic arms, she's now back teaching kids in London. There's photos of her today. She's writing on the blackboard. She's lifting books. She's talking to the kids. It's amazing. This is actually what Great Britons are all about. This kind
Love
of
it. Brilliant choice. Benjamin Butterworth, who are you going for?
Well, I want to give an honorary mention to Anne and Angela, who came up to me to say they love Monday nights with you, Dan. And so they're my honorary. And my real Greatest Britain isn't a Briton or even a human. It's Big Bird, who has been advocating for children in the US to get their COVID vaccine.
Oh, I think we actually have a clip of this. Let's have a look.
You know, my granny bird says that since I'm 6 years old, I can get the vaccine.
Oh, yeah, that's right, Big Bird.
But, well, I have a lot of questions. Like, what is a vaccine? And does it have to be a shot? And will I still need to wear my mask?
Esther Kraku, who are you nominating?
First of all, I'm just cringing so hard at Benjamin's.
So how's that British? That's not British.
Literally.
I think Brits should listen to Big Bird.
Oh, OK. Oh, yeah.
A giant bird. I nominate Princess Anne for laughing off that young kid that called her beautiful and sexy while she was at the, I believe it was the Riding for Disabled engagement. I just think she's really sort of has a very fun spirit about her. And I love the fact that she can just laugh it off because that's really a very audacious thing.
Yeah, I love that. So she was asked, are you the Queen? No, the Queen is my mother. But the person went on to say, you're very beautiful and very sexy. Not necessarily words that I would usually associate with Princess Anne, but there you go. The winner tonight, though, the Greatest Britain, Carol has convinced me. What a woman. Kath Tregenna, an incredible mum of 2, is today's Greatest Britain. But this is the part of the show that I enjoy most. Let's get nasty. Carol, who's your nominee for Union Jackass?
Mine's George Eustace, the Environment Secretary. This is the guy who, at the weekend, after all that messing around last week, trying to change the standards, rules and regs, he said at the weekend, he said this was all just a storm in a teacup. And basically, we should all just get over it. He still doesn't get it. He doesn't get that what happened in Parliament last week was politicians sticking 2 fingers up at the electorate and saying, you know, one set of rules for us, another for you. And he just confirmed why people think politicians are always out for themselves and don't give a stuff about us.
Carol nominating George Eustace. Benjamin, who are you nominating for Union Jackass?
Well, today it has to be Boris Johnson.
Oh, there's a shock. There's a shock.
No, but I think we should all agree.
Not like you choose him every week.
But I choose him this week because we had a debate about sleaze among MPs and specifically the Tory party, and he didn't even treat the public with the credit to turn up. This is a man who hid in a fridge during a general election, who flew to Afghanistan to avoid based on Heathrow.
You boring Boris hater. You boring Boris hater. Esther Kraku, I believe you've chosen a bloke who used to have his job as your nominee?
Yes, John Major, who has somehow finally found his tongue during Boris's prime ministership. Isn't it ironic when a politician calls another politician a sleaze? I mean, really?
Well, especially when it comes to John Major.
Exactly.
Especially when it comes to John
who was
Major.
basically like steamrolled the entire time of him being Prime Minister.
Well, he was the king of sleaze, wasn't he? And I mean, we don't like talking about John Major's tongue after all of those Edwina Curry reports, do we? But look, Esther Kraku, you have most certainly convinced me. John Major is today's Union jackass. Carol Malone, Benjamin Butterworth, Esther Kraku, thank you so much. I'll be back again tomorrow from 9. But don't go anywhere. It's time for Headliners. I'm so excited about this. Good night.
Hello again. A lot of cloud overnight for many of us, and rain is sinking south across northern parts of the country. But it will be milder as a result, and then it turns drier and brighter during Tuesday. Here are the weather fronts that are sinking south overnight. In between them, a slice of mild Atlantic air that contains an awful lot of cloud, some thick and low cloud across many parts of the country through the night. And these outbreaks